Today, we're going to break down one of the most chilling incidents in all of aviation history, the crash of Aeroflot Flight 3352. And really, it's this terrifying story of how a few seemingly small mistakes can all line up just right to create a catastrophe that's, well, it's almost unbelievable. So, picture this. It's 1984, October 11th to be exact. We're at Omsk Airport in what was then the Soviet Union. And on this dark, rainy night, a totally routine flight is about to come to a horrific end. You know, the craziest thing is, by all accounts, the pilots were doing everything right. They were lining up for what should have been a perfectly normal landing. So the question is, how did it all go so terribly, so catastrophically wrong? Well, to figure that out, we have to rewind and look at the moments right before the crash. Because even with some challenging conditions, everything seemed to be going exactly according to plan. Okay, so what were they dealing with? The plane was a Tupolev Tu-154, a real workhorse. But the crew was flying into a pretty tough situation. It was pitch black, raining, and visibility was dangerously low. I mean, these are the kinds of conditions that demand absolute focus from everyone involved, not just the pilots. The plane touched down, its wheels hitting the tarmac, and in that split second, which should have been a moment of relief, turned into an absolute nightmare. A routine landing became a horrifying collision. The result was just complete and utter devastation. 178 people lost their lives. Think about that. 174 on the plane, plus 4 people on the ground. It became one of the deadliest air disasters in Soviet history. So what happened? This is the part that's just so hard to wrap your head around. This wasn't a mechanical failure. It wasn't a pilot error in the traditional sense. The plane literally slammed into 4 maintenance trucks that were just parked right in the middle of an active runway, totally hidden by the darkness. And you've got to be asking yourself, right? How on earth does that even happen? How do 4 trucks end up on a runway when a plane is landing? Well, the investigation revealed it wasn't one single mistake. It was a terrifying chain of them. To really get this, we can use something called the Swiss cheese model. Just imagine that every safety rule, every procedure is a slice of Swiss cheese. Each slice has some holes. Those are potential weaknesses. Now, usually the holes don't line up, so you're safe. But on this night, they did. Perfectly. Okay, so let's look at the first and maybe the most critical hole in the system. And it started in the one place that's supposed to guarantee runway safety, the control tower. Yeah, you heard that right. The air traffic controller responsible for the runway had actually fallen asleep at his post. He'd given the ground crew permission to go out there and work, but, and this is the crucial part, he never ordered them off the runway before he cleared Flight 3352 to land. But as bad as that is, a sleeping controller was only the first failure. Because down on the tarmac, the maintenance crew was making their own disastrous calls, punching the next hole right through the safety net. And this is where the story just gets completely surreal. It's not just that there were 4 trucks on the runway, it's that all of their lights were switched off. And the reason why? Get this, they didn't want the glare to distract the incoming pilots. I mean, it was a well-intentioned thought that turned out to be a catastrophic violation of the rules. The final hole in our Swiss cheese was something nobody could control, the weather. This was the environmental factor that basically sealed the flight's fate. Look, even with all of these insane errors, there was one last tiny chance. Maybe, just maybe, the pilots could spot the danger themselves. But in the driving rain, in the pitch black night, those unlit trucks were completely invisible. There was no way to see them until it was far, far too late. The holes in the cheese had all aligned. Now, a disaster of this magnitude, caused by such a fundamental breakdown of the system, you can't just ignore that. The aftermath of Flight 3352 forced a really painful but absolutely necessary reckoning within Soviet aviation. This wasn't just another accident. No, this was a massive wake-up call that shook the entire industry to its core. As one of the deadliest crashes in the nation's history, it became this powerful catalyst for change, all aimed at making sure this kind of chain of events could never, ever happen again. And you can actually see a direct line from each failure to a specific reform. For the controller fatigue issue, They brought in stricter monitoring and new fatigue management rules. For the runway violations, they completely overhauled the protocols for who can be on a runway and when. And to help improve visibility, things like ground proximity warning systems were adopted much more widely. So what's the big takeaway here? I think it's that it wasn't just one person's fault. It's so easy to just blame the guy who fell asleep, but the real story is about a total systemic collapse, where individual mistakes, broken rules, and just plain bad luck all aligned perfectly to create this unimaginable tragedy. And that really leaves us with something to think about, doesn't it? The next time you're on a plane, remember that you're protected by countless rules and procedures. And it's pretty sobering to realize how many of those life-saving rules were written because of tragedies, just like this one.